Okay, I'm 93. Okay, so that gives me, I'm the honored one. The story I'm about to tell you cannot be disputed because there's still another person alive who's on your list of people, Freddie Franklin, who was in the original rodeo. Now this starts when the Ballet Russe was playing in the Metropolitan Opera House on 39th and 7th, isn't it? The old one. And every night, my husband at that time was married to Alexandra Danilova, the prima ballerina assoluta. So they would go to the theater and pass the door, and they'd see a young girl sitting with a portfolio, being very quiet. This went on for several evenings. So Casimir Kokic, went over to this young girl and he said, "Why are you here every night?" She said, "Well, I have an idea for a ballet and I'd like to meet Mr. Sergei Denim, who was the head of the Ballet Russe at that time." So Kokic said, "Well, come with me." He took this young lady, whom we did not know her name, into Alexandra Danilova's dressing room in the old Metropolitan Opera House. He said, "Now, what do you want to do with your idea for a ballet?" And she said, "Well, I'd like to meet Mr. Denim." So Mr. Kokic went out of the dressing room, leaving Agnes with Alexandra Danilova, and he found Mr. Sergei Denim and brought him back to the dressing room. So Mr. Denim is such a perfect gentleman. He looked at this young lady and he said, "And what is your name?" And she said, "Agnes de Mille." Well, the word de Mille just hit him like, this is Agnes de Mille? Anyway, he listened. He said, "What do you want to do?" She said, "Well, I think it would be very funny for the Russian dancers to do a cowboy ballet." "Well, what do you plan to do?" She said, "Well, I'd like to rehearse with some of your dancers." He said, "Well, we're closing here and we're going on tour, but you can come with us if you pay your own way.
Oh.
And you can rehearse with some of the dancers who are not in the evening's ballet program." So Agnes went on the tour with the Ballet Russe de Monte Carlo, paid her own way, and rehearsed with Freddie Franklin, Casimir Kokic, Luba Rudenko, herself, and Mlada Miladova. One day, Mr. Denim came to her and he said, "Well, how are you getting on?" She said, "Well, I'm very proud of what we're doing." And he said, "Well, I'd like to see what you've done." So the dancers prepared and they showed what they had done to create this ballet rodeo. I think at the time Agnes had decided on Aaron Copland's music, but I'm not certain on that point. Anyway, Mr. Denim liked what Agnes had done. He said, "Oh, well, we'll put this together as a ballet. Now, continue rehearsing, and when we get back to New York, we'll decide on costumes and so forth." So they come back to New York, back to the Metropolitan Opera for another booking, and they decided Kermit Love would design the costumes, and Karinska, Madame Karinska, would do the actual making of the costumes. Well, rodeo opened at the Met. It was a fantastic experience, and the audience adored it. And in the audience were two very illustrious people whom Mr. Chapin knows very well from the Theater Guild, Lawrence Langner and his wife Armina Marshall Langner. They were thinking of producing a play called
Away We Go.
Green Grow the Lilacs. And they were looking for a choreographer, so they went back to the Theater Guild offices and they talked to Rodgers and Hammerstein, Richard Rodgers, Oscar Hammerstein, and said, "We think we found the lady to do your choreography for Oklahoma." So Rodgers and Hammerstein went to see this performance of rodeo, and they said, "That's the girl, that's it, that's what we want to have. We want to have that feeling in Oklahoma." And that's when they approached Agnes and presented the idea to her to do a Broadway musical with doing the choreography that she would decide. And that's how Agnes became a Broadway choreographer.